Next on Newsmax Prime, can the grand old party get over its problems, or will the Republican rift get worse, and how should conservatives deal with it? Also ahead, Georgia Governor Nathan Deal vetoes a religious liberties bill, and Richard Land says that's a bad deal for believers. Plus, what is the deal overseas? North Korea claims it can launch a preemptive nuclear strike against us, and the Pentagon pulls our military dependence out of southern Turkey. We'll talk Turkey, Korea, and more with General Mike Hayden as Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, the perils of political pachyderms, or is the Republican Party at risk? The three remaining presidential candidates don't sound that keen on the pledge they signed to support the eventual nominee, and controversy surrounding this unusual campaign has come at the expense of discussing important issues. John Bachman has more.
Well, J.D., Trump shows his loyalty to his campaign manager, but will he be as loyal to the GOP in that pledge he signed back in September? If last night's CNN town hall was any indication, not very loyal. Anderson Cooper asked the candidates if they will support the eventual GOP nominee, but none of them would give a straight answer.
I'm not in the habit of supporting someone who attacks my wife and attacks my family. You say you will no longer guarantee that you will support the Republican nominee.
I have been treated very unfairly. Look, I won the state of Missouri, right? No, I have. Cruz people. I've been treated very unfairly.
Well, maybe I won't answer it either.
Everybody's laughing. Last year, Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, made Trump sign that pledge that he would support the nominee. But if you read it carefully, there was nothing binding in there. Earlier this month, during a GOP debate, both Ted Cruz and Kasich promised to support Trump if he were to become the nominee. I guess that's all out the window. And JD, just think about this summer. We're going to be covering possibly 3 VP picks for these guys. No one's going to be able to get to 1237. After the California primary in June, the only thing we can safely say is it's going to be a political summer like neither of us have ever seen before.
Well, maybe a variation on something I've seen before in my lifetime, John, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, something that happened in 1976. But for more on the here and now, we're pleased to be joined via Skype by Newsmax TV political analyst and presidential strategist Dick Morris. Dick, of course, the co-author of Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. And joining me right here on the anchor desk, Glen Downs. Glen, the former chief of staff for Congressman Walter B. Jones. And when we were both but callow young men, he was a delegate, a Reagan delegate, to the 1976 Republican Convention in Kansas City.
Very true.
Great to have you both here. Let's check in first with Mr. Morris, shall we? Dick, you have just written a new column on how Ted Cruz can still get to the nomination. We're going to get to that in just a minute, but we just heard John Bachman with the latest on all 3 candidates backing off that pledge to support the nominee, no matter who it might be. What does that do to this already fractured GOP?
Well, for Cruz and for Kasich, I don't think it matters much. But Trump's announcement will matter something because he's going to have the capacity to inflame his supporters to a boiling pitch if he's denied the nomination in a way he considers unfair. Now, I believe that the convention, when it opens, will have Trump in the lead, but not at 1,237 needed for nomination. My own guess is he'll be just slightly above 1,000. And I think Cruz, who will probably by then have Rubio's support and his delegates, will probably be less than 100 votes behind. And then there'll be a lot of maneuvering and wheeling and dealing. One of the things that may happen is that Kasich may be knocked out of the convention because of a thing called Rule 40B that they inserted 4 years ago that said you must have at least a majority in 8 different state or territorial delegations to be able to be placed in nomination. And Cruz and Trump do, but Kasich has it in only Ohio. Even if Kasich is let into the process, there are about 100 delegates who are coming to the convention completely unbound from Pennsylvania and from North Dakota, and some would include Colorado. And they can vote for whoever they want. They're like Democratic superdelegates. The Republican superdelegates are largely bound. So you really do have a situation where there's a a lot of flexibility, a lot of movement. My own guess is that there will not be a first ballot nomination, but that it will probably be resolved on the second ballot, and probably not in favor of Trump. The question then is, what does Donald and what do his supporters do?
Well, that's intriguing, the notion of a second ballot. Glenn, you were a delegate back in '76, the last really contested convention. It did not go to a second ballot, but that did not lessen the degree of contention on the floor of that convention.
That's exactly right, J.D. I suspect that that's going to be foreshadowing of what we might see here in this cycle 40 years later. You know, at the time, the blood was really, really running hot. And I can remember shouting matches between Reagan supporters and Ford supporters that only got stopped when the band would play God Bless America and shut everybody up by getting them to sing along. And at one point in time, the Vice President of the United States stole a sign from a fellow North Carolina delegate, sat on it, wouldn't give it back. And that's when you get the vice president into that kind of joust and parry. Imagine what could happen here 4 years later, or 40 years later.
That was the late Nelson Rockefeller, who apparently also, if memory serves, offered a unique salute from the convention podium. I won't go there, but it is worth noting that Ronald Reagan demonstrated what leadership was even in defeat. Let's take a look at what he said to that 1976 convention when all was said and done, and see if we learned the lessons of that advice from back then.
We've got to quit talking to each other and about each other and go out and communicate to the world that we may be fewer in numbers than we've ever been, but we carry the message they're waiting for. We must go forth from here united, determined that what a great general said a few years ago is true. There is no substitute for victory. Mr. President.
And boy, that message really rings true today. Let's turn back to our good friend Dick Morris in his latest column. You say that Donald Trump right now really does have the path to the nomination. It's not there, an interstate highway paved, but the Ted Cruz pursuit is a little bit more chancy. However, it's still possible. What really would a Cruz victory hinge upon, Dick?
Well, I think the big thing would be, first of all, he has to win some primaries. Cruz has never won a state in the industrial Northeast. He didn't win his Iowa, Oklahoma, Texas, Maine. Those won't cut it. He's lost in Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan and Minnesota, and he has to win in Wisconsin convincingly. Then he's going to go to New York, where he's probably going to get slammed because Kasich and Trump are doing very well there. And Pennsylvania, he'll probably get slammed again, where at the moment he's running third. He has to do credibly well in New York, and he has to do credibly well in Pennsylvania. He doesn't have to win them, but needs to get a quarter to a third of the delegates. Then there are a whole lot of other states, winner take all and winner take most, where he's got to do well. And then he's got to do very well in California, winning about 2/3 or 3/4 of those 172 delegates. It's a tough chance for Cruz to take, but I think momentum's in his favor. I think people are switching to him because they're getting turned off of Trump and realize that Kasich is the spoiler. But it's not a done deal.
No, it is not. It is not a done deal. And some other factors. Glenn, we heard John Bachman predict that we might see vice presidential picks from all of these guys. You saw that in '76. Reagan surprising everybody, picking who we called liberal or moderate Republican, Senator Richard Schweikert of Pennsylvania. Do you expect these candidates to pick running mates heading into Cleveland?
That or something like that. There'd be some kind of horse trading, horseplay go on. You might also remember in that '76 convention, after Reagan had picked Senator Schweikert to be his running mate in advance of the convention, should he be the nominee, there was an attempt to change the convention rules to force Gerald Ford, who is holding a lot of people out on a string, to pick his nominee or as a running mate in advance of the convention as well. So there could be all kinds of horse trading relative to picking potential nominees and running mates. but also with the rules that have been referenced here.
Well, and we think about those rules, and Dick, you referenced them about what may happen in Cleveland. We should note John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, the convention is in Cleveland. You have another column out saying that the Kasich candidacy is actually propelling the Trump campaign. Tell us why.
Yeah, Kasich is enabling Trump because in all of these states, it's either winner take all, at which point Kasich takes votes away from Cruz and gives Trump the plurality, or winner take all by congressional district, in which case the guy who wins a plurality in each district wins all three of those delegates. PPP just did a poll where they showed Trump 12 points ahead of Cruz with Kasich in it, and only 2 points ahead of Cruz with Kasich out of it. So the Kasich candidacy is really enabling the Trump candidacy.
And we take a look at the polling now. Glenn, the latest poll from Marquette University has Ted Cruz up by about 10 points 6 days before the Wisconsin primary. But I'm intrigued by something else that happened in 1976. Gerald Ford had the power of the incumbency. A lot of promises were made, dinner with the president, going to the White House for personal visits, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, none of the Republican candidates are president, but Donald Trump's got that big jet. He's got resorts. Do you think Donald Trump might follow almost, dare I say it, a Gerald Ford scenario to entice delegates who are undecided?
That's an intriguing question. I'm not sure. I think probably the better analogy would be that you have Republican leadership in Washington and the leadership of the Republican National Committee and this rulemaking authority that's got the ability to dish out favors from the existing power structure. But Trump is not just your typical non-incumbent president. He's got the Mar-a-Lago and Trump Force One and all of that to offer as well. So.
And Doral, go down and play a round of golf. Hey, Dick, just very quickly, 20 seconds. Is there going to be a third-party run to come out of this situation?
Well, that depends on what Trump does. You know, 19 million people voted in the 2012 primaries, but we're on a pace this year for 33 million to vote. Those extra 14 million people were brought out largely by Donald Trump. And if Trump were to lead them into a third party, that could certainly happen.
Well, we will have to stay tuned. Dick Morris via Skype, we thank you for your time. Glen Downs here on the anchor desk, bringing back memories of 1976. Thanks very much. Dick, of course, the author of Power Grab, Obama's dangerous plan for a one-party nation. If you have some comments, we'd love to hear them, and I bet you do. And here's where you can send me your comments. You can send them to NewsmaxTV.com/comments or via Twitter, where our handle is @Newsmax Prime. When we come back, our political panel with more on this Republican rift and its possible consequences. Stay with us.